So good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Thursday. Listen, this morning, guys, I want to pop on to share with you 5 ways to resolve conflict in your relationships, in your marriage, particularly. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I shared with you guys 4 things that are guaranteed to ruin your marriage, and that those 4 things are like stonewalling. Now I'm getting brain fog, but they go back and watch the video. But I didn't want to leave you there. I didn't want to leave you with what was going to ruin your marriage without telling you how to resolve the conflict. So the 5 ways to resolve the conflict, and this is also based on one of John Gottman's books. So I'm telling you guys, get into his study if you are having issues in your relationship or if you really want to grow. Listen, many times we want to just be right. Being right doesn't necessarily keep good, loving, healthy relationships. Now, you can be right, and a person may still stay with you, but it doesn't mean they feel safe with you, nor does it mean that the relationship is growing or that it's a prosperous relationship. Lots of couples just stay together, and that was something that I was dreadfully afraid of prior to getting married. I did not want to grow old with my husband for the sake of, well, we've been married for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but not like each other. It's important to me to maintain the friendship in the marriage, because I think it was friendship that brought most of you guys together. So we want to make sure you know how to continue to be friends even through marriage. And marriage can be extremely challenging, and you will be faced with big situations. So here are 5 things you can do when you are faced with conflict. The first thing is, I want you to learn how to share what you feel about the situation and not describe the situation. So many times when we get into arguments with our spouse or significant other, we will get like focus in on what they did and how it upset you. Yes, but like go deeper. Don't just start describing, and then you did this, and if you wouldn't have done this, this wouldn't have happened. No, we want to start talking about, when you did this, it really hurt me, or it really made me feel devalued, or it really made me feel unheard or seen. When we speak like that, right, most people can attack that kind of conversation. I understand there are going to be those who still stay in defensiveness. Remember, defensiveness was one of the things that will ruin a relationship. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to be defensive in the conflict. We want to learn how to speak from our I statements, talk about what we feel, and not just describe what happened. The second thing we want to do is we want to take full responsibility. Like, so one of the things I fully believe is that we are responsible for our own emotions. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not responsible to communicate them. That doesn't mean that our partners don't trigger us. They do, but we're still responsible for our part in every situation. There's a saying that say it takes two to tango. So if you're in conflict, there was an argument, something that was that caused major conflict in your marriage, or it was just a screaming match. I understand in your mind, maybe you didn't start it, but still take responsibility for the part that you did play in it, right? Take responsibility for the fact that you showed up ready. There are people I meet, and they live at that ready set, and all they need is one thing to get them across the line and say go. And I don't fully understand how they don't realize that they've already made up their mind that if something goes in a direction they don't want it to go in, they're ready to, as they say, pop off or fight or argue. That's a choice that they already have a preconceived thought or decision to do and act out of an anger. And if they can use that same mind to decide ahead of time, you know what? I don't care what they say. I don't care what they do. I'm not going to lose it. I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to hold composure. That's you being responsible for your emotions. That's you then, once the conflict is over, being able to say, listen, I know I maybe said the wrong thing. I apologize for engaging. I apologize for maybe talking about your mama in the middle of the argument. Take ownership of your part. And when you do that, right, now you're helping to build bridges towards the two of you guys working together. The third thing you have to learn to do is to validate another person's experience. Validate your partner's experience. And listen, I'm going to talk a little bit about this with my daughter. She and I have been in conflict for a while, and she will share with me her experience of our past. Historically, when she would share, my thing would be like, that's not how it happened. That's not what happened. But I had to learn to say, you know what? I'm sorry that you had that experience. I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm sorry that that's how that made you feel. And instead of being in defense, like, yeah, that did happen, but that's not what I meant to happen. And I didn't mean for you to feel that way. No, just validate that I am sorry that you had that experience. I am sorry that that was what happened. That's how you perceive that situation. Because listen, two people can be in the exact same space having two totally different experiences. And we have to learn to recognize that my validating your experience doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it, doesn't mean I even really understand it, but it does mean that I respect the fact that you are individual and you have every right to have a different experience than I have. So if you're in conflict with your spouse about something as simple as the way the situation happened, you don't have to fight to be right. Release and say, okay, you know what? Sorry, that was your experience. I didn't know that's how you experienced that. Wow, thank you for sharing with me that that was your experience. Because one thing I've learned that I truly appreciate is that as a married couple, we are blessed to have the opportunity to have a different perspective of a situation. Because if we're both there, your partner see it and you see it one way and your partner see it a different way. Instead of arguing about the way it was, be like, wow, cool. Like, tell me more about the way you saw it. Tell me more about how you had that experience, because I didn't experience like that at all. And so this allows us the opportunity to have a different perspective of the same experience. So validate your partner's experience in the conflict. You don't have to fight with them to be right. The next thing you want to do is to repair and de-escalate. So you want to repair and de-escalate every situation. And how do you do that? One of the ways to repair conflict or situations, right? Instead of focusing on what your partner did wrong, um, all the hurt and pain of the situation, can you think of something in the midst of the situation, in the midst of the like coming out of the conflict that you really appreciate about your partner? Can you like even appreciate the fact that, you know what, I appreciate that you love me enough that you want to argue about this situation instead of stonewalling, right? That was one of the other things that will ruin a relationship. I appreciate that you will argue with me about this instead of stonewalling, meaning going quiet, withholding your love, withdrawing your attention, and not talking to me. Because for me, that would be like torture. For someone to withdraw and not talk to me when we're in conflict, that feels like torture to me. So I can appreciate now that like Andre and I have gotten to a place where when things are really hard, we can take a moment and I can say, hey, I really need to talk about this. And he may say, I will listen, but I haven't had time to process the way I think and feel about it. Because if you watch earlier videos, you learn that, you know, it takes men a longer time to process what they're thinking, right? So women, we have a thought, we articulate it, we can quickly articulate, but men contemplate, then articulate. And so being able to appreciate that, like I appreciate that you even taking time to think about it, that you're not brushing it off, because a lot of times we assume that they're perceiving or having a situation or having an experience that they're not having. As women, we often assume that people are having an experience that they're not having. And so instead of assuming, just wait, ask the question, appreciate them for taking the time to ponder. I appreciate the fact that you've decided you're going to come back and talk about this. I appreciate that you would rather get calm than to yell at me. Like, find a thing that you appreciate about your partner when you're in conflict. And that's going to help you because once you shift your mindset from being right or I'm going to tell him and they're going to see it my way to wait a minute. Let me remember, why did I marry this man? Why did I marry this woman? What do I like about them? What do I really love about them? Oh man, I really appreciate that about them. When you can get into that heart space, now you can have a conversation where you are in it to resolve conflict and not in it to win or fight or be at war with one another. And then the last thing, and I remember years ago hearing Joyce Meyer say this, and so I would try it, and it worked. Um, they said when you're angry with each other, you touch, hold hands, put your hand on his arm, get close. And I know it feels uncomfortable. I know that's not maybe what you want to do at the time because you're so upset. You just want to like, I don't want them to touch me. But the reason you want to touch, because once you touch each other, it will dissolve some of all the anger and all the hostility. Now, listen, I recognize that every situation is different. I recognize that some people are in very abusive relationships. And so this is not an option for you. Here's the thing. These suggestions and these strategies for resolving conflict, these are not for people who are in abusive relationships. This is not going to necessarily work for the person who is married to or in partnership with someone who is brutal or extremely angry or vindictive. Like, you can't change that person. You can't be nice enough to make them not be that mean. So I'm encouraging you, like, if you're in that kind of relationship where you are walking on pins and needles at all times, where you're trying really hard to be good so that you don't set them off, you need to get out of that kind of situation, because sometimes people are so wounded. And so one of the things I teach in my coaching is about emotional wounds, soul wounds. In therapy, they call it trauma. Some people are so wounded that they don't even recognize that their level of abuse and the way they deal with other people is a problem. They really believe that the issue is outside of them. They really believe that the issue is the other person. And so if you're in that kind of relationship and you've been maybe traumatized, or your wound is abandonment, so you believe that my job is to stay in this and I'm going to love him or her to treat me better, baby, your love cannot heal a person from deep wounds and deep trauma. You know, the Bible says that love covers a multitude of sin, right? But we got to remember, God's love, Jesus's love, cost him his life. His love for us cost him dying on the cross. So I'm going to ask you, like, do you want to die on the cross, or whatever that cross is for you all? Die in this relationship, die physically, die emotionally, die spiritually, because you're trying to save a person who's so wounded that only God himself can save him. And here's the thing, even about salvation, guys. Here's the thing. This is what I love about God. We still have to choose. Like, we have to have a conscious choice and decision in our salvation. So if you're trying to save a person who they themselves, they're not trying to change, they're not trying to be saved, they're not trying to do better, if you're praying for their salvation while you're in the midst of taking blows, while you're in the midst of being verbally abused, being called out your name, being spoken to in the most harsh way, I encourage you to get out of that situation. Pray from afar. Pray from afar. Let God be the one to go in. Let God be the one who gets close and creates intimacy with this person who is hurt and wounded and broken to the point where they will break you. But please know that these 5 things I shared, they cannot restore or a relationship with a person who is abusive, because an abusive person has to come into their own awakening that they are willing to accept responsibility for their action. And responsibility, accepting responsibility, isn't saying, I'm sorry, I promise I won't do it again. It's accepting full responsibility and true change. I always say this, true change requires a new and different relationship with God, love, source, universe. There's something there has to be a new relationship with something greater than you, some form of spiritual awakening and change. And you're going to see that in they're going now to a church, or they're going to a therapist. They're going to, they're literally doing something intentional to get help. They are not just, okay, I'm sorry, I ain't gonna do it no more, because it takes a lot for a person to change. It takes a lot. And a person who's been extremely wounded they need help. And you, my dear, or my man, if you're in that situation where this person is willing to put their hands on you because they can't even control their temper, sweetie, your love cannot change them. So I pray that this message was a blessing. I pray that everyone who listens to it is blessed by it, that, if you are in conflict and you need help, reach out to me. If you are in an abusive relationship, get out of that relationship, and get to a place of safety until your person you're in relationship with can learn how to surrender their life to something greater than they themselves, and then really have a true conversion where they're truly sorry, and you see it in their actions. Not one time, not I'm sorry, but I'm going to therapy. I am learning how to manage my anger. I'm learning what causes anger. I'm learning what my wounds are, what my trauma is. I'm learning how to handle it different. Otherwise, baby, your love can't change. Can't change a person who doesn't want to be changed. All right. Have a blessed day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.